Good afternoon and welcome to Revit 2016 Worksets and Central Files. My name is Stan Henney. I'm the Business Development Manager here at CAD-1, but much more importantly today we have Barbara Thompson, AIA.
Hello everyone.
And Barbara is one of our two architectural instructors, a registered architect herself. And then we have Brian Juge, AIA.
Hola.
And many of you know Brian, so this ought to be a good webinar that we've got put together today here. Do we have a slide for the webinar?
We do. We've been
controls.
We need this thing.
We always like to show this just in case. Most of you have been on a webinar by now, but first off, if you want to get the console out of the way, you can hit the orange and white arrow and see the whole screen. Can you raise your hands? Hit the raise your hand button there. Garfield, there's enough of you who've been on these things that know the drill. Sounds like everybody can, or looks like everybody can hear us from all the raised hands. Thank you very much. And if you have questions, please type them in the question box, and we will get to them as close to in context as we can. Now, I always like to put out the caveat because we have a lot of fun on shows like Revit Radio and so forth. This isn't fun. No, but what we do like to do, this isn't Revit Radio, and so please, if you have questions, stay on topic of the context and everything, and we will take your questions as they come in as close as we can. So with that, where are we going to start?
I think the first place to start is with our agenda.
Okay, what are you going to do the poll?
I don't know if you want to introduce it, Barbara.
All right, so our agenda for today, we're talking about work sets, central files, local files, work sharing, and just sort of how to get started, not really advanced stuff here, getting in some different options on what you can do with work sets and work sharing. So first of all, what is work sharing? How does it work? And we'll look at the different types of work sets that you can create. We'll talk about the best use of work sets and how to use their settings in your workflow. And then also discuss how the central file is different from your local files. And then toward the end, we're going to get to workset optimization. So what is the best way to use these for your practice? And what are some best practices, sort of caveats, and some ideas for working this into your workflow?
Yeah, so it'll be a good roundabout discussion in here. First of all, before we get any further, I want to...
Are you guys going to talk about collaboration for Revit?
We will talk about collaboration for Revit.
Good.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. I might show it a little bit. Right now, we just got to pull up just to say, hey, who's our audience? Who's out there? For anybody who marks other, if you could write in the question what other means, because I have to put, well, you didn't pick our industry, you didn't pick my industry. Well, I don't know what industry you're in, so it's a little bit hard sometimes.
You know, in other words, facilities management,
yep.
Maybe fire sprinkler or some sort of specialty contractor, or whatever it may be.
Put the contractors.
It says subs on there, but still.
Yeah, you never know. All right, so I'm going to close that up in 3, 2, 1, and just post it so everybody can see what the breakup is in there. So a pretty good mix out there, I would say. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. So I'm going to do another poll in here, and so I'll hide that one. And just one other one we'll start off with is, what current version or what version is your most current project in? We know people switch, and you might be working on multiple versions of the project. Heck, we've got someone who's not even using Revit who's attending a webinar. They just must love the sound of our voice.
Mm-hmm. I just love Revit. I just don't want to use it.
All right, so I'm going to close that in 3, 2, 1, close. And it seems like a majority of you are in 2015. No one's taken the jump to 2016 yet, at least not in this webinar. So that's pretty interesting to see out there. And So
Well, that's their projects, right? You know, the way you stated it, their projects are in 2015, which would make sense.
yeah, their projects aren't in
They
there.
haven't been migrated.
So we've got a couple other polls that we'll get to, but we'll get to those in a second. I think then get back to our slideshow here and then discuss the differences between the different types of work sets. Because for just some terminology in here. So you can see we have work sharing. Again, this webinar is designed, we've had a lot of requests for people who haven't done work sets, don't know what a central model is, what a central file is, how to use it. So we're just trying to fill in the information, make sure everybody's on the same playing field in here. And so this is about work sharing, and you know, you'll hear terms like element borrowing and owning elements, all kinds of things, saving to central or sync to central as it's now called, all these other terms, and we'll make sure everybody's understanding what's going on in here. All right. So most of the time, people get into, when they talk about work sets, they're only talking about one type, and that is the user-created work set. But did you know there are 3 other types out there that no one ever really gets into that much? I don't know, Barbara, if you want to talk a little bit about those. You want me to get into those a little bit?
So when you start work sets, you enable your work sets in the project. You have those that are created with Revit, so your shared levels and grids and Workset 1. But you can create others, so user created is what Brian's talking about. Most people will use the user created work sets. Families are already in a work set technically, and you can control those. And then also your views. So project standards, if you haven't used those before, so these are elements that you could share between other projects. You can use your shared project standards, borrow them from another project so you can be consistent when you're moving on to new projects.
Yeah, so those would be things like tags or your system families, ceilings, walls, stuff like that. Those can be, they're also a work set that can be controlled, locked down. Administrator privileges can be assigned to those. Same with all your families, your standalone families that are out there, and all the views you create for their project. So this creates a lot of opportunities that you can have out there with work sets. So for the most of what we're going to be talking about in this discussion are going to be user-created work sets. That's what we're going to focus on. And when anybody's talking about work sets, I would say 99% of the time, that's what they're concerned with. But we want you to be aware that there are these 3 other areas that you can get into, and we'll show those briefly when we get into the software about what those are. And just want to make you aware. But from here on out, we're pretty much going to be talking about just the user-created work sets, the most common area.
And so we're talking about work sharing. Now this is if you have large projects or even on small projects. Maybe you're the only person actually working on this model. You can still use work sets in order to organize your project and to divide it up into these different work sets in order to control displays, or it also can control whatever's not being displayed. Doesn't have to regenerate each time with the project either. So if you're having issues with RAM or just with the project loading, then you can also control that visibility and help with that.
Yeah, I think that some of the things to remember is that when you're breaking these up, we want to be breaking them down as far as how they're constructed, how the systems are being built in there. I always try to think in terms, and again, this is the architect in me, of fire and smoke separation barriers, things like that. That's how I'm breaking down my model. Now, a lot of this information we're going to give you is going to be an overlap between what you would probably do with linked files, but work sets kind of follows some similarity as far as how you break the model down and how you're dividing that model up. We can see in the little example in here, we've got things like the core, the exterior furniture, interior mechanical. It's going to be broken up into, again, those systems. The core and shell might be in there. If you have a curtain wall system, that might be a separate system in there. I like to put my vertical circulation on its own system just because stairs, are very complex objects, and we want to have control over that and make our file run smoother. The other thing is breaking them down by consultants, making sure that we have everybody's discipline. Now again, we did say linked files, but let's pretend that you don't have linked files, everything's in the same file. Another way of breaking this down is by worksets. And even if you were dealing with linked files, you want to make sure all those links are on their own workset. We want to be also thinking about the speed and visibility. That's the main focus of why we're going in and using worksets. Speed, making the file faster, that you only need to deal with your particular portion of the file. And the visibility, how to control that. You could go into the visibility graphic overrides once you enable worksets, and you could turn things on and off in each view based on worksets in there. One example that a recent colleague, Tony, gave me was he has lighting for both interior and exterior. So you can't just go into the visibility graphic overrides and just turn off lighting, because it'll turn on all off. But if you're just doing interior lighting, he has a work set for just interior and a work set for exterior, kind of doing that. Couple of bad habits that I didn't think we would see much of, but we still are. Do not base work sets on the usernames or the users on there or the CAD layer standards. That just seems to keep popping up. So I did have a quick poll in here on here, and I just wanted to see, how many of your projects are you currently using worksets for? So we've got a poll out here just to see who's out there, who's doing this, and we're seeing it's kind of a big of spread in here, so I'm going to close that poll in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, close it, and share that with you guys. But you can see with that display,
It's not sharing for some reason.
and hopefully you guys can see it. I'm hoping, and if you can't, raise your hand. For some reason, Stan did something with the screen.
Yeah.
It went down. Okay, we can see it. Okay, so you guys can see it.
Okay,
We can
good.
see there's some people that haven't seen this at all. This seems to be pretty new. And then there's a big majority of you, 50%, that have done this before, and all your projects are in, or a majority of your projects are in Worksets. All right, so get that one. And I had one more I wanted to put out there.
Came back.
How many Worksets do you use on a project? Let's see what we got there. So we've got, I was thinking the 2 number, just the standard, would be higher than it is, but it's not. All right, I'm going to close it up in 3, 2, 1, share that with you guys. But we can see out there, there's still some, how many worksets you use on a project. A lot of people marked none. I'm not sure if that meant they're not making any anymore, or maybe they lumped with the number 2, or they're not using them at all. And then we've got at least one person out there using 15 plus, which, maybe we need to talk about that. I'd be curious as to which ones you're using out there, so we'll hide that one. And then I've got one little final one in here to share with you guys, and it's kind of a quiz, okay? Where do you store the central file? So let's see if we can pull it on there and find out how many people paying attention to this. Now, I will tell you, there are actually, there's probably not a wrong answer.
Right.
Yep,
We're
it just
not
depends on
judging
how.
here,
We're not
so-
judging. I'm just kind of curious out there.
Not sure is kind of a worrisome answer.
That's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that just means you don't really care, I guess.
You
Or
should have put the what is the central file?
yeah, what is the central file? By now they should know what the central
Yeah.
file is.
It's
I'm going to close that.
confusing.
3, 2, 1. All right, and then share that with you. But yeah, we could see that 90% of you are doing that on the server. There are some people doing that on the desktop. We can talk about why that would be a not so good answer, but we can also talk about why that's just a fine answer. Maybe not the desktop, but on your
your own
personal
computer, yeah.
I don't know about the desktop. I probably should have put your own personal computer. All right,
It's
so
easier there.
it is easier there. Okay.
So a few of the things then we'll get back to a little later as far as, central file, or maybe we should start with that, I don't know, creating. We're actually going to create a project here. We have one we'll get into. But initially setting up the work set. So what should be a work set? So do you need a work set for everything that's in your visibility graphics? Do you need to divide up a building into 15 plus different work sets? it's a part of that's going to be dependent on the project, of course. So sometimes you may need only 2, and sometimes you might need 10 or more. A couple of things, who's going to be working on the project? How many different people are actually needing to access this project at once? So work sharing, we're talking about everyone working on a single project at the same time, and rather than having to wait for somebody down the hall to finish up with their portion, then you could still be working on the overall project. So what you don't need a work set for, anything that's already a category, you can already control those with your visibility graphics. You can control the visibility of that. And so making it a work set is really redundant and not necessary. So other things could come up, with things like your doors and windows, they already have categories. We don't need to create work sets for that. Other things that are just logically grouped together can be in a work set. So the core in shell is a logical grouping of elements in there. So let me open that, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, my Revit decided to, it wants to be fun today. Wow. All right.
I said earlier we weren't having fun.
We weren't having fun, and neither is Revit is having a lot of fun because it wants to take over my project all of a sudden. Yeah, let's see. Close out that guy.
The Illuminati have control of
They
your
are.
machine.
Yeah, we think this is all about our control, but it's just Revit's control.
All right, so before we can actually take a central file or make a central model or anything like that, we need to enable worksets. That's one of the tricks within Revit. So if I come in here and I try to do a save as to this project, and we go over to the options, we can see right now that there's no way for me to make a central file. Now, I know we haven't necessarily talked about the central file yet, but we're going to get into why that's important. Okay, so make this a central model after save. Well, to do that, we need to enable work sharing. So I'm going to come back into this file in here. And
So maybe we should go over what is the central file. So we have the project, if we've already started a project, we'll save that as a central file, and then from then on, nobody works in the central file. We don't want to have anybody making changes directly in that file. So each individual working on the project will create their own local file saved on your machine that you're going to work on until you can upload it or synchronize it with that central model. Some good practices, you'll want to create a new local file every day. So when you first sit down at your desk, you're going to open the central model, create a new local for you. Then at the end of the day, you turn that back in so that it can all be synced and everybody knows where the model is, the current state of the project.
Now that's a good practice, in a firm where everybody's kind of working in the same place. But obviously there's different protocol if you're using some collaboration software, or you've got several different firms or several different offices working in different locations. So there's no one rule that holds true on central files, really. You kind of have to decide.
Yeah. So to go in and, for some reason, my file doesn't want to work, so I'm going to open up another session of Revit here. But this is where you would go into the collaboration area in here, and then we could go in and start looking at creating on work sets within our file. Now mine's currently disabled, so again, I will get into that in a second, but I'm going to go in here and I'm going to just open up a house really quickly. And collaboration's been around for quite a while inside of Revit. But inside here, if we go over to our Collaborate tab, we can see that we have our work sets, and now it wants to do all the other stuff. So we can go over here, collaborate with my network. All right, then we can go into our work sets. And once we get into our work sets, I've got a new special feature I'm trying to avoid telling you about, and that's the Autodesk 360. But I'm going to have to do that. So when you first start to fire up with a file, you're going to get 2 work sets, shared levels and grids and work set 1. And these are going to be your default work sets that you start off with. Now, one of the practices that I like to do is come over here and rename Workset 1 to O1 Workset. And now the reason for doing that is just like in other software, other pieces of software, when we go ahead and list this, Revit likes to do everything numeric, alphabetic order. So I want Workset 1 to be at the top, so I'll rename it O1 Workset. And then by default, when I go to my list, it's going to be organized in that manner. Now, after I set up the work sets, I can go in and add new ones just by hitting new. Maybe I've got some furniture or some other types of work sets that we can put in there. We can list all those in there. Once that's done with the file, I'll just hit OK, and it'll ask me, do you want to make the current the one I just made current? I'm just going to hit no for now. But then it's going to go in, it's going to grab everything in the project and divide it up. So if I come in here and I select this roof or something, I'll now see it's on Workset 1. And it's been broken up and divided into the model that way in here. So I can go in and I can break up the model in a lot of different forms by setting that up within the model. And then if I wanted to, I could go back into the work sets and I can actually go in and close those. And I can go in here and hit close, and what that'll do is it'll remove those items from the model. Now in this case, that model completely disappears, but if I go to the floor plan, you can still see that my base file is still in there. I also have some grids that were left on from the original file. The levels and the grids are still turned on, but the overall model is turned off. I can come back in here though and open, click on the work set and open that up again, and then when I do that, the whole model is turned back on. So this is a global setting. It's not per view. When you go in here and you start turning on and off the work sets, they're on and off completely for the whole entire model from then on out. However, in the visibility graphic overrides, because you started using work sets, we now get a new category over here for work sets. So just in this view, I can go into the work set, and in this one view, I can determine, well, in this view, I want to hide or show those particular elements. Okay, so this is kind of one small advantage for using the work sets, is that we can start controlling them view to view to view. And it works a lot like layers, that we can select anything in the model, whether it's this door or whatever, the wall, and we can assign what work set it's going to be on. So we can come inside here, grab it, and maybe I'll put it on the furniture. I know that's not where it goes, but now it's on the furniture. And if I come back into that dialog, I can go into furniture and say close. Now when I've closed that, that wall is completely gone. It doesn't show up in the model at all. And Revit stops thinking about it in a sense. Okay, so my performance is going to start to increase and start to build up and be faster within the model. So this is a great advantage for an office with multiple people. We can have these huge models, but if I'm not working with furniture, I'm not working with lighting, I could go in there and turn on and off these things. Now, one of the nice things is that now that we've got the central model, I'm going to close out of this file. Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to show you that now that I have this file, when I go to save it, and I go to the project and I do my saving features, I can come in here and under options, I'll now see that right in here, it's now going to make a central model after save. And that's now turned on by default. Before that was unchecked, it wasn't being used, but now having this turned on, it's now going to make a central file in here. And now you can have multiple people work on the file at the same time. Now this doesn't mean that an office with one person isn't going to be able to take advantage of these features of work sets. And so we're going to get into that a little bit, and we got a couple people on another file, so I'm going to close out of this file in here. I'm going to do a little bit of Martha Stewart, and I'm going to open up another file in here. And
what do you mean? Go to prison for tax evasion?
Yeah.
Brian.
What? No. Oh, there's a fun one. Send report. Actually, I don't know why I'm sending a report. I broke it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to open a project, and I'm going to get into my files and get to see our big string of where things are kept. And inside here, I should have a place where my server's at, and we can see right now we're using a server file and in my webinar, and I got the central file. Now, one of the other choices that we have in here is we can look down the bottom. Right in here, it's going to create a new local file, and that new local file is going to be stored on my local machine. This particular file right here, the central file, is being stored on the server. Now, if you're a one-person office, you could essentially store that central file on your local machine, and if you're the only one in the file, there shouldn't be a problem with that, and you can work outside the central inside the central model and take advantage of those work sets to turn on and off the file itself. And that's not a problem. What you want to avoid, though, is when you have 2 or more people working on the file, that wants to be on the server. There was also another option for cloud-based, and that's coming too. It's actually here now. So that's where the new created local file is going to be put on my local machine. Well, I could detach this from the central and make a separate new file from that right in here. Now over here under Open, I have this little arrow in here. And right down here, this is going to be one of those settings you really want to pay attention to. And what I did is when I saved this model, when I made it earlier, I set it to specify what work sets I want to open. So it's going to open up a preview list. So when we hit open, I'm going to get a list to determine what work sets I want to turn on and off. So I'm going to go in here and hit open on this file, and it's going to launch it right off the server, and I get this list. These are all the work sets that were in the file. You can see there's O1, there's furniture, shared levels and grids. I added one for site, elevator, structure. So I had some other things in here. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn off the site, and I'm going to close that one. I'm going to turn off close level and grids. I'm just going to keep everything closed except for Workset 1, which is the main file. Okay, so you can see all those are closed, and now I hit open. And this is going to be a thing that you want to do as each user is preparing to open up the file. Okay, if Barbara, she's going to be working on furniture, she might just want to open up the furniture and the O1 work set, or the interior walls or something like that. For me, maybe I'm working on the site. I can go out there and open on the site plan and close all the interior stuff. And it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect one user or the other if someone else has different work sets turned on and off.
And I see several people from MEP firms and structural firms, and you can apply the same thing. Maybe one of you is working on one set of circuitry and another one's working on ductwork or something like that. It works all the same way.
Yes. So it's going to be one of those where it doesn't matter your discipline or where you're at, you all can take advantage of this. Now, the one big thing is this thing's going to be able to navigate really easily. Mine's going to not, my particular file that I opened isn't going to think long and hard about doing different movements, especially if Barbara goes in and moves furniture around, or Stan decides to move lighting or anything like that. I'm not being affected in that way. My performance is really going to be not taking a dip at all because of these different features. So I'm going to go back into that entry-level furniture plan, and I have no furniture in here. But I got these people over here, and I'm going to see if I can start taking ownership of some of these. So I got this, and I've got this little make element editable little cubert-looking symbol in here, and I like using that. So I click on that, and it says, nope. That's kind of what I thought would happen. And right now, I've got Tony in the file, and it says, I can't place this because Tony currently owns this file. So I'm going to place a request to Tony, and it's going to put a pop-up on his screen in here. Now, one thing I am going to do before Tony does something, I'm going to grab this wall in here. I'm going to place ownership of that wall. So inside Revit, we can have multiple people in here, and I'm going to own this wall. But if somebody else wanted to take ownership of that wall, they would have to go in and select it and try to take it from me. But now I own it. I can manipulate it. They can manipulate the door that's hosted in the wall and do some other things, but I have the ultimate say on what happens to that wall right now.
And so even though it says Workset 1 or furniture, whichever one we're on, is not editable, as long as no one else has it borrowed at the time, then you're free to move that element or make changes in that workset. So once somebody checks it out through the Workset Manager, then you'll have to go and request that you borrow it from them. And then they have to grant you that request.
So right down here we can see who's in what workset. Barbara's in the furniture workset, so I could go in and turn that on right now and open that up and see if Barbara has anything in here. I don't know, did you own anything, Barbara?
I did. I moved a table, but I haven't synchronized yet, so you can't see it.
So I can't see what Barbara's updates are looking at in here, but I could work around just fine. And then when I'm done, and have you synced yet?
No.
No. Okay.
So I'll synchronize now.
So Barbara's going to synchronize first, and I want to see her changes to the tables in here. So I go back to Collaborate, and I go to Sync with Revit. And in here, I can see the different things I can do. So I can compact the model Okay. Other things I can do is after synchronizing, I can relinquish my rights to things. Okay. So I have new view work sets. I've created a new view in here and borrowed elements. So if I borrowed anything like that wall that I borrowed earlier, I can relinquish my rights. Now I'm going to uncheck the borrowed wall element. I'm going to keep my rights there. Well, the other thing is we have this comments field, and we can put all kinds of messages in here. And this is one I like doing a lot when you're going to different milestones within your project. So if you're doing an ASI or you're responding to a particular RFI, put in the comments when you're putting it in there. This is going to be a really nice thing that's going to travel along with the Revit project. So even if you lose your paper document, you're always going to have these comments in here stamped at the date whenever someone synchronized at that particular moment in here. Now I wouldn't put every little move that you do inside the project. That's a little bit of an overkill, but you know, putting those milestones in here, this is going to come back and really pay dividends later on in the project. So I'm going to put that in here, hit OK, synchronize it, and then I should see the table change.
Holy cow.
Look at that. So I can see Barbara's moved things around a little bit in here. Now,
one thing I wanted to note was in that last dialog box, Brian, was that there's a check mark for save your local before and after each synchronization. So until you actually go through and get the synchronization to work, and so that goes all the way through, your file could still be lost, and you still lost whatever you did on your local file. And so make sure that you're saving that regularly, as you always do when you're working on a project.
and that's very important to point out. Also with those local files, you'll find that Revit is got a high degree of backups. What I'm trying to say with this. And what I really mean by that is that all the local files have their local backup copies, and then the central file has its own way of doing backup copies within that too. So you have a lot of redundancy. That's the word I was trying to think of within the backup system inside the files.
You're repeating yourself.
I am
Redundant.
redundant.
So I'm going to try to move your wall here. Yes, it is.
All right, so Barbara's trying to remove that wall. And you have to,
Okay, so I tried to move the wall that Brian claimed, and it says I can't. Someone else has been using it, and so he needs to relinquish that. So I'm going to place a request to Brian to relinquish that part of the model.
yeah, and it takes a little bit to do, but it comes back in here, and we'll start to see a request pop up in here. Or if you start looking down in here, these are where the requests are being kept. This little guy down in here, and it's putting all these different request marks up here, up in here, so we can see. Here's one I did with Tony, what element it was out there, and then I have another one in here, the basic wall that Barbara is requesting from me. Or you'll get a pop-up that will appear, and I was just too impatient to place the pop-up. Wait for it, but let's try it one more time in here. There's actually a setting that I'll show you in a second. I don't want to touch anything, make sure we can get this thing to pop up in here, but it takes a little bit for the request to come through. It's flickering.
While we're waiting for that, Mariah has a question. Where are the comments documented to look back at later on?
That is a great question. I will cover that in just a second. We're going to go over in a jiffy. We'll get to some of those in a second. So up top here, we also have the editing requests. So inside here, I can look at all those editing requests, who was requesting what at what time in here. And if we look at these, we can also go to show. You also see the item highlights in here, so it'll tell me what item people are requesting in there, and show, and it'll zoom into that particular item and give me that elemental ID number in there. So that is on the editing requests that were found in there, or you'll get a pop-up that will appear in here.
Brian, it might be helpful, since we said this was a 2016 based class, are any of these things that you're noting 2016 specific, or are they pretty much in most current versions?
Most current versions are going to have this. There are some things up here, like this communicator that's appearing here on the right, that's on the collaboration for Revit, along with the collaborate on 360 and the views for A360. All these particular features here are new, and I'll get to, I'll talk about a little bit about those. So one of the new things that's coming out is this collaboration for Revit, which is a cloud-based central file. So if that answer cloud-based for storage, you're now going to see that. And really the only thing you need is just an internet connection. So you could put the central file. It exists on the Autodesk server in the cloud. Has an unlimited amount of storage that you can put out there. It has a web interface in here. If I think we can get to the right page, so you can go to the web interface to look at the particular file that you want to get into, different users that are in that file, how to manage your projects. Out there, there's a little chat screen that we can go in and talk about the different projects that are listed out there. There's editing features. You can share the file with people that don't have Revit, and they're going to get a preview file. It's not really Revit, but a preview of a field, I believe, viewer. And it's actually in the immediate future, we're going to be able to go in and redline and stuff like that directly on the screen in the viewer, which is going to be a nice thing to have out there. And it's all live collaboration. So the structure, the mechanical, electrical, architecture can all host their file all at the same time and pull that down. And it's as good as your internet connection. This is going to allow people working remotely from the office a lot of flexibility, because now we're not relying on hardware and what your connection speed is at the office or anything like that. It's just, can you connect to the internet? And that's how the file is being distributed. So we're going to see a lot of great things happening with this, and we might talk about that in a little bit more.
It is a good tool. There is a fee for collaboration for Revit.
There is a fee.
A free thing.
The other thing we talked about is those comments and stuff. So over here we have the managerial roles for this particular file. So I can go back in here and I can say show history. And if I go back and I select that particular file and hit open, what we're going to see in this file is all the history of the file back to when it was first created. And this was an Autodesk file, so I can come back in here and see this was made in 2008. So it's quite a bit old file that we were just using in here. But we can see all those different things, and I say, when I created the central file, Tony joined the project, added 9 lights. Tony again, hi Brian, Nancy here, so Nancy's joined along. So we have all these different comments in here that are being done. And again, that was done up here in that show history folder. And this lives with the project. So this is all kept in the central file, in their date and time stamped on when that happened. Every time anybody synced with the file, we have all that kept up in here. And again, as a PA, as a PM, this has been great for us to have within the file.
So Mariah, hopefully that answers your question as well.
We can export that out as a text file and use that. So if you need to, show the client what you were working on, how many hours were spent, and it's not tracking every hour, but at least you're saying, oh, that person, they didn't get home, they didn't leave till 8 p.m. or whatever it happens to be. So I got that in here, and I've got a request. Barbara keeps nudging me over here to say I got to save to Central, or sorry, sync with Central. So I need to do my borrowed elements in here, so I'm going to release those. Now the other thing so I released my rights to them, and all of a sudden now there's trees, there's there's all kinds of things. People are moving around. We can see someone's having some fun in here. So I've also got this other one. We looked at the show history, but we also have restore backups. So if I wanted to go back in and look at a earlier version of the file, the backups with the central file are done a little bit different than your typical file. You still have your local file. It's still being stored the same way by duplicating the file with the 001, 002, so on and so forth. But when we go to restore the backup on the central file, we point it at the folder, and you're looking in here, and there'll be nothing. That's okay. We hit open, and what we'll find is this is all the file versions that we have in here. And this will remember how many backups you told it to create. So if you said create 20, it'll have the 20 versions in here. And I can go back in, and I can roll back to that particular date of that file, and it'll remember all those changes. So what's being done is it's basically a log that's recording all the elements that are being added, moved, deleted, and changed. And that's how the central file is being stored. There's a log that's just basically tracking every single command that's being done and where everything's being placed. And it just rolls back that log to the previous saved versions of that particular file.
Randy asks, is that a backup of the central file or your edits?
That is a backup of the central file on there. So that'll have have the backups that were created in the central file. If I wanted to go to the backups of my local file, what I would need to do is find out where those are located. And under options, we have the file locations. In the file locations, you have the default path for user settings. So that's where my local files are being stored. So when you go in and you, see if I can do this with open a project. Oh, I should know. Let me come in here. I'm just going to point out that same file we were in before. But in here, I just want to point out, creating new local file, that's where it's going to dump that local files and that save settings that we put in there. And then all the backups would also be located in that same location for that. All right. So let's see. Let me sync with Central. Make sure I sync my elements. There you go, Barbara. All right. Oh, there we go. Hey, Kilroy was here. That was nice. I don't see his nose popping up, though. That's a new version. We got to put that in there. I think I got it in my next useless Revit family. All right. So we talked a little bit about this, but let me go back to this central file graphic in here. Oops. So what's happening is, again, you have your local file that's being done. So when you go to create from the central file, you have the local file being stored. And what's happening in Revit is Revit's keeping track of the elements that you own. Locally, it knows where you've moved them, when you deleted them, all those other things. The only thing the central file is keeping track of is what you own and if it was deleted or moved. That's all it really is keeping track of. When you move it, it doesn't know where you moved it. It won't know that until you go back and sync with Central or save to Central. So to see those updates, you must sync with Central, and then if anybody else wants to see those updates, they must sync after you sync. And I know we're using this, I keep using this term save and sync with Central a lot. That's because it used to be called Save with Central. Now it's called Sync with Central. So the terminology is kind of the same in here. Now, another thing we get into is when we're creating Worksets central files, the different types of projects. So tall projects, we want to think of in obviously by height in here. So it's still going to be broken up as a general rule by core and shell, again by your fire barriers, stuff like that. You might have an exterior skin, curtain wall that might be a separate work set. Your floor and plate podiums, it might be where you break up those particular areas. So when you're talking something that's tall, you might break up the work sets by maybe the lobby and the first couple floors or one work set, and then the next 5 levels, then the next 5 levels, then the next 5 levels, so on and so forth, are their own particular work sets.
And depending on who's working on each of those different areas, you can look at it that way too. So if Brian needs floors 5 through 8, then I can have the rest of them.
Exactly. But it's, again, the reason we want to have those in there so we can turn some of them off and keep that performance up and not slow that down. Now, when we get to a more vertical project, something that's more linear.
Horizontal.
Horizontal, not vertical. Sorry. Thank you, Stan.
There we go.
That's why Stan's here. Keep me in line.
Give you some direction, Brian.
So yeah, more horizontal project in here. We want to break it up by areas, and again, it's going to come down to construction. I'm still thinking of area separations, things like that, where you're having your major fire separations, or if there's just separate buildings, that just makes it easier. Now again, I probably would do that with links first, but let's pretend we don't have links, so it's going to be kind of the same mentality for work sets.
Real quick, Brian or Barbara, Matthew asks, before we get too far away from it here, Matthew asks, if a central file is upgraded from 2015 to 2016, would there be a restore backup for that version? I don't believe so.
So the backup would still be 2015, right? So if you restored it, could it upgrade it then?
I think you might just see an upgrade from the previous version. The log file doesn't change. I don't know exactly what would happen. I haven't tried to back up in between versions. That might be something I just need to test. Unfortunately, this is 2016.
I'd save a version of the file just to make sure.
Well,
Right,
yeah, you'd still have a backup in there.
Yeah.
How you would have to recall it?
Well, That's what I mean. That would worry me a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the log file is going to look at that. Because you couldn't open it initially to get to the backup. Bow!
Can you rename backups as RVTs?
Maybe. You know what? Maybe we just try it. Let's see if I can.
And then things got weird.
And then things got weird, exactly. Anything else on the collaboration for Revit, Stan?
Well, we all think it's a great tool, and if I see people are the fabulous thing about our webinars is that people are joining us from all over the world anymore, and I think that's really cool. But at the same time, when I throw out hey, give us a call if you want to take a look at it, well, we can't go to some of your places very easily.
What? I would love to go to Australia.
We'd love to do that.
Well,
Saudi Arabia,
very
come on.
easily is what I said.
Stan's expense account, we can go.
No place is too far.
Garfield says the backup will be in the version of the last sync to central.
Yeah, I know the backup would be, but can you use it? Can you recall it? Can you recall it from 15 even though it was 16?
And you restore it.
Can you restore it? And I guess that's what Matthew's trying to ask.
Yeah.
If you go to 16, can you go back to 15 and do a restore? I'm not sure. Now we'll go in and save it really quick. Hopefully quick.
And Garfield again comments, if it is in show history. Good. Thank you, Garfield. Great comments.
Okay, so there's your answer if it's in show history. I don't know if it's not in show history. Why wouldn't you be able to? Yeah, that would be interesting to do. All right, let's put this one in here. So there's the 15 file. Close that and then come in here and open that particular project, and it'll update it. Hopefully I'm not messing up my own work here. It's no big deal, right?
Wouldn't be the first time.
No, it would not be actual client work, and then you're just go in here. Where's the fake server? There's the fake templates. We have a lot of fake things going on in here. Small file, should be fine. Okay, getting back to the agenda on here. I think we had most everything covered. So,
a couple best practices. So again, create a new local file every day. Don't let anybody work in your central file because you may need to go back and replace that if somehow it becomes corrupt. So you want to protect that central file so that you don't have to do that.
I know some people say a best practice is to, as Barbara says, create a new file every day, but some people even like to, save it to central while they go to lunch and then, kind of clean up some stuff too, and be able to pare back a lot of that work that's slowing down the file over the morning. You can kind of clean that out and then start the afternoon fresh as well. So.
Yeah, whenever you leave your desk for more than 2 minutes, you're going to want to save to central, relinquish the rights. Last thing you want to do is hog up all the time with that particular file, because if you walk away, then you talk to Bob, and then you talk to Nancy, then you go over to the water cooler for a little bit longer. By the time you get back, it's a half hour, 45 minutes, and that chair that you were working on, someone else needed, and your computer's probably thrashed because they went over there and just decided to mess with it. It's taking too far, so I'm just going to cancel it. Sorry, guys. It's just not progressing as well as I wanted it to. But, so it sounds like if you can get to the show the history file, and Matt, I can talk to you a little bit later about that and just show you again on that particular one. But yeah, the other best practice is if you leave early in the day and you're leaving around 4, and you're the guy that comes in at 6 in the morning, you might want to open up and create a new local file, because that guy who left at 8 at 9, he's going to have the most current version of the file. And if you're having 50 people in the file, you're going to be have the oldest version of that particular file. And it might take, on bigger files, 5 minutes to open the file and then 5 minutes to do an update. So instead of waiting that extra 5 minutes, just make a new local file, and that'll skip that update process in there, because you're always grabbing the most current version of that file. Again, whenever you're taking a break, close out of that particular file. When you go to lunch, it's a good idea to actually close Revit, relinquish a lot of the memory that's being hogged by other resources in there. But yeah, if you're going to spend a bit of time away from your computer, make sure that you're closing that file so that others can work on that stuff inside here. And I know this was a topic that we had a lot of requests on. I was thinking we might have 45 minutes in here, and I think we made about 50 minutes in here. And anybody else have anything to add as far as best practices or optimization? There's one other area I can't believe we've completely forgot. So as much fun as this may look like in here, there actually is a lot of other tools that we can get in there. That's this Worksharing Display. So by clicking on this, I can go in here and turn on what are the worksets. And now I can see all the worksets in the file, and they kind of code them and color them in different ways. So I'm actually going to come in here and get in the worksets. I'm going to turn everything on in here so we can see all this stuff. So I'll open all these. Hit OK, and you can see some of these are yellow, orange, green, all these different types of worksets. This is one way of kind of helping to clarify the file. You can see what's on one workset. So if I grab this particular floor system and I decide to change it from one workset to another, I can come in here and say, no, it's supposed to be on site or something. Well, site's probably not a good one. Tony, you're placing requests on me. Oh, man. Here's one on stairs. Hopefully Tony doesn't own those. Please don't own it, Tony. All right. So I'll go in here, and this is on stairs, and I'm going to set it to structure, and then we can see it's changed color. It is now on a different workset. Or if that workset was turned off, I could go in and turn that particular, that thing would disappear if that workset was turned off. So I think that is in this one. So I'll go in here, instead of structure, I'll put it onto site, and no, it's not turned off. No, it's red because, that's right, the trees are on in here. That's the worksets in here, and we can see the Worksharing Display settings in here. These are all the colors that have been assigned. They don't normally print. Again, this is a temporary setting in here, but we can see that these are all the colors that it's setting up. We also have the model updates. So if we go to model updates, we can see everything in blue was moved. Anything that's red would be deleted. So if someone were to come along and delete one of these tables or something, although it would take a little bit to do the refresh, we would see those particular changes in here on the updates. We can also look at the owners, and this was a nice one. So I can come in here, and if I do owners, I can see who owns what currently in the project. And I get these different color fields in here. So I can still see that it looks like Barbara's probably owning this one. Nope, Tony is owning that one. Again, Tony and Nancy's owning this one. So we can see all the different colors in here. Someone just decided to own that. I gotta own something in here.
We put a beetle in the middle of the lobby.
There, I got blue or yellow. And we can come in here, look at the settings again, and see these are all the different users in here and who owns what particular item within the file. Okay. And then we got the checkout status. Red is checked out by someone else. Green is checked out by me. And that's pretty much what it is. So it's very similar to the owners, other than it just doesn't really care on who owns what. So we can go into these display settings. And this one's been out since, I think, 2013, I believe. This Worksharing Display settings has been on. So if you haven't seen this before, this has been a huge help. Now we can come in here and kind of look at who owns what in the model and take ownership, or see what's been changed in here, so that we got the owners, the model updates, any updates. In other words, it's been moved, or anything that's been deleted, that turns red. Okay. Things to avoid is you don't want to do work sets based off of individual users. That's kind of a no-no. The other thing that happens is anytime you make a new default view in here, it's going to make a default view based on your individual user profile. So now I get to see my name in here with my own 3D view. And that's something that takes place. This is my view that I can go in and manipulate and change or do whatever I want within the file in here. All right.
Barbara, how about you? Do you have any last minute tips here for the home game participants out there?
You know, I think we've covered everything.
Got everything covered? How about questions from anybody? Does anybody have some questions to finish us up with here?
So it's kind of the things have not changed in this particular area in a while. It's I think the philosophy and on what's out there is still relatively the same. Nothing really new has changed in that regard. I know we did talk about the other types of work sets. I'll just show those. Here's the project standards. So you can see all those, and we can edit and lock those out. So you've got the analytical settings in here, arrowheads, color fill schemes. So those are the project standards. We've got all the families inside the model, so you can take ownership of those, borrow those, make them uneditable type of things. And then in the views, we can also go in each view you can change and
with
modify.
that in mind, because this may answer Mariah's question here. How are those views named? I have had coworkers 3D view named after my email address.
They are named after whoever is logged in with that file. So mine is picking up that I am logged into Autodesk 360. Or if, and I can't necessarily change this right now, but if I wasn't logged in, I could go into my options, and if you come right in here into the username, this is what's picking up the username, and that by default is the computer name. Once you log into Autodesk 360, however, that is taken over in here. So whoever is in the 360 account, that's going to override and become the username for that particular file. Okay, so it's going to go, so unless I sign out of 360, I could, actually it doesn't really matter, I could sign out. Now I can change this name and say I'm just Brian Juge or whatever, hit OK. Now if I go in and make another file name, it just has my regular name, not with my email address tied to it.
Okay, and Eric's got a question here. You mentioned closing out your local file if you leave your desk, leave for lunch, etc. Is there added benefit to doing this versus syncing with Central and saving your local, but still keeping the local file open?
I follow the philosophy that local file after a while is going to become a little old on projects that are advancing quite a bit. You're just kind of hogging up resources for no reason. If you, for instance, if the file becomes too old, now usually it's over a day, 15-day period, but if there's been too many changes to that file, the file will not sync to Central. Revit just says, forget it, it's too old. Go make a new local file. So if you get pulled away to a meeting or you get pulled away to something else, just being in that environment, I know what happens is you intend on leaving for 5 minutes, you don't. You get pulled away for an hour or you're gone for the rest of the day because some emergency popped up. It's just, I guess it's more like courtesy to close out of the file. Also, just having that practice that whenever you open a view in Revit, it's cached that into memory, and keeping that same philosophy, you need to close out a Revit to release that memory that's being stored. So if you're going to take those long breaks, close Revit. Let your machine have a rest in there. And that way people aren't waiting on you. I don't think it's necessarily bad just to keep the local file open. It's just that, if you're going to be gone longer than, 20 minutes, a half hour, it's just a good idea just to close out of it and get in there if you're gone for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's a good habit to avoid future problems too, if anything happened.
All right, folks. Well, thank you very much. As always, we appreciate this. We are recording it, and it will be on our YouTube page in the very near future, and you'll be able to find that on CAD-1 webinars, and then under the archive section, you can find the link to that, or just go to CAD-1 CAD-1 Presents on YouTube, and they are on there as well. So looking forward to it. Thanks very much, and we will talk to you on the next webinar. Appreciate your time. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.